What is happening, everybody? James Hancock here. I'm back to review the Season 2 premiere of The Last of Us, which dropped tonight on Max. And it sounds like this season, which is 7 episodes, is going to be the first of several seasons loosely based on the video game The Last of Us Part 2 from 2020. But this first episode was written and directed by the show's co-creator, Craig Mazin, who's written the first 5 episodes of the season, and he'll be joined later in the season with the writing duties by series and game co-creator Neil Druckmann, as well as Hallie Gross, who also worked on the second game. And so I'll go spoiler-free initially. Might have some spoiler-specific details later in the video, but I'll give you a verbal warning as well as a time code. But my first impression is, I think this season's going to be fine. I think it's going to be hardcore. I think at times it's going to even be scary. But it does have a situation where Craig Mazin seems to be deliberately writing Ellie in a way to make the audience antagonistic toward her. And I don't know if he's doing that for some sort of dramatic payoff deeper in the season. I can only judge what I've seen with this first episode. But I've never played The Last of Us Part 2. I've watched like an 8.5-hour video of cutscenes mixed with gameplay. So I know where the story's going, but watching cutscenes is not the same as playing a game. But it does give you an idea of like the major story beats and the tone. And Ellie in the game is adorable. She's lovable. Like you can't help but root for her. You can't help but enjoy playing her when she's one of the playable characters in the second game. I don't know why Craig Mazin is kind of doing subtle changes to the character to just make her more abrasive, more like she's got a chip on her shoulder. But she is annoying, however. As annoying as I might have found her character to be in this first episode, when she was threatened, I did feel fear for her. So I guess that's a credit to the show where even with a character that I'm not rooting for, I'm kind of hoping that the infected will, do terrible things to mean to say, but that's just my initial honest response. But if I am able to feel genuine concern on her behalf, then there's something to be said for this show in terms of its ability to still generate tension, anxiety, and I'm very curious to see what additional kind of curveballs and additional twists and turns will be added to the infected in the season, because already with this episode we've seen 2 curveballs, which I'll get to in my spoiler section, which have my curiosity piqued. And I genuinely, sincerely want the show to be good for a couple of reasons. First and foremost, if I'm watching anything, if I'm wasting hours of my life watching something, I want it to be fantastic, because otherwise, what's the point of watching all this stuff? But I also like the fact that HBO is periodically dabbling in the world of much more kind of hardcore genre fare. I mean, this is a show based on a video game. And obviously, when you say that, that means something different now than it used to 5, 6, 7 years ago. Obviously, shows like Fallout have definitely helped erode people's negative impressions of video game adaptations, or movies like the Super Mario Brothers movie have definitely helped change people's perception of video game adaptations. But I can remember when the best you could hope for was something like Mortal Kombat in the mid-90s, which admittedly I saw 3 times in the theater and thoroughly enjoyed unironically, but it's a pretty terrible movie and didn't do anything to change people's perception of video game adaptations at that time. But I've always admired the fact that when HBO tackles a strict genre story, they do so with a lot of depth and sincerity. I mean, obviously, The Sopranos is just a gangster show, or Deadwood, it's a fucking Western show, or Rome, historical epic. But they've done a great job in the past of injecting additional life. Or even a more recent example like The Penguin. Ostensibly, that's just a show that takes place in the world of Gotham. Like, it's a superhero show in the absence of the superhero, apart from in small doses. But I thoroughly enjoyed The Penguin. So I hope that HBO will continue to be the Rolls-Royce of TV in the years to come. And obviously, The Last of Us generates a lot of clicks, a lot of eyeballs. And if they continue to put their best foot forward with The Last of Us, well, then guess what? We'll get more video game adaptations done just as well as The Last of Us. Like, can you imagine if they made a show based on Red Dead Redemption, or the sequel that was made as compellingly as The Last of Us has been so far? And I'm not going to say it's a perfect show, nor was season 1 a perfect show, but enough of it worked really well where I remained on the hook. And I reviewed every single episode of season 1. And if I were to try to zero in on why do I find this concept interesting, whether it's the game or the show or a mix of the two, I just find the basic core concept to be absolutely fascinating. What would happen if plants could somehow turn people into zombies with a fresh coat of paint? Because the zombie genre has been more or less played out over the last 60 years, going back to George A. Romero's Night of the Living Dead. And every once in a while, we'll get a good one. I'm fired up for 28 years later, which they're not zombies, it's the Rage Fires, but they're basically zombies. Once again, zombies with a fresh coat of paint. But I do enjoy a good zombie show and or a zombie movie, but it has to be awesome. Like Lucio Fulci made some good ones. George A. Romero made some good ones. Who else has made some good ones? Well, just between those two guys, you've got all the great or friggin' Edgar Wright with Shaun of the Dead and things like that. Or 28 Days Later. Not technically zombies, but it's basically zombies. Anyway, there are a lot of great examples in the genre, and I think The Last of Us is a great example. There's something just so sick and twisted and terrifying about these little fucking plants that move, that get into our bodies and take over and just make us mutate over time, and how the longer they stick around, the more horrible they become. I mean, a bloater is definitely more terrifying than a clicker. Clickers are fucking savage, but bloaters, I think we only got to see one, maybe two, but definitely one in season 1, and it was awesome. I felt like it was underutilized. And later on down the road, deeper into the second game, there's an additional iteration of the Infected, which I am beyond fired up to see. It has the potential to be one of the most graphic, hardcore, terrifying examples of sci-fi horror in television history, if done right. And once again, I don't know if they'll save that for season 3 or what, but I might stick with this show for each and every single episode, no matter how annoying Ellie is being written by Craig Mazin, just for the off chance of seeing that creature. And once again, if you're a player of the game, you know exactly which encounter I'm talking about, but I won't spoil that here. But let's just say that when it comes to horror, the best is potentially yet to come. And all the teasers for the rest of the season, when you see those waves upon waves of the Infected attacking the town, it's like, this looks fucking badass. But all roads lead back to Ellie, who is the star of this story. And I think right now, in spite of the fact that Bella Ramsey is obviously a very talented actress, Craig Mazin is very deliberately trying to turn us against her. I don't know why, because everybody else in the show is more or less very likable, very charismatic. You're rooting for them. You want to be around them. But in nearly every single scene in which Bella Ramsey spoke, I was like, ugh, why are you going that route with the character? Even the character of Abby, who was introduced this episode, who was a figure of controversy in the second game 5 years ago, she was immediately likable. It's hard to discuss Abby without venturing into spoiler territory, but let's just say that just from what we've seen in this episode, she is being set up as an enemy to Joel. I mean, the season opens up with her basically vowing to hunt down Joel and do terrible things to him. So we know that Abby and Joel eventually are going to have a major collision of some kind. And even though I'm rooting for Joel and I like the character of Joel, I like the character of Abby too. It almost makes you wonder if they'd found the character or the actress playing Abby, if in an alternate reality, if they'd hired her to play Ellie instead and hired Bella Ramsey to play Abby, would that have improved the show? I mean, obviously, we can't wind back the clock now, but it does make you think about the possibilities. But so far, I'm liking everything that I'm seeing about Abby, apart from the fact that she's lacking in a little upper body strength. In the game, Abby is built like an MMA fighter. I mean, she is just shredded. Look up an MMA fighter like Kayla Harrison, who is just shredded. I mean, she's a total just monster. That is how Abby is supposed to look. And if Kayla Harrison could act at all, she would have been pitch perfect casting for the character of Abby. But in order to back up my point about the interpretation of Ellie's character this season, I will have to go into spoilers. So last warning, 3, 2, 1, if you've not yet seen the season 2 premiere for The Last of Us, bail out now. But let's get into Ellie, because this story takes place 5 years later, and they keep describing how because she's 19, she's going through what every 19-year-old girl goes through, where they start to resent their father, or Joel's obviously not her father, but her father figure, and that is totally normal. But the way they're writing her, it goes a little deeper, because she has a full-blown chip on her shoulder, and an early scene illustrates this perfectly, where she's going through training in hand-to-hand combat, and she is applying what is arguably the crummiest triangle choke that I've ever seen. And if you don't know what a triangle choke is, you basically have one leg over the person's shoulder around their head, and it goes under your knee, and you squeeze down, and it chokes them unconscious. I've taken a few jiu-jitsu classes, and I have been rendered unconscious by the triangle choke. And then once they let it go, you immediately wake back up, and you've had a little dream. I can't stand it when in shows and movies we see a crummy triangle choke where their ankles are locked, but the foot on the bottom should come down and be under the knee so that you can squeeze down and actually create that pressure. And of course, you also have to reach for the head and pull it down. But it cuts you off your blood and your air so you go to sleep. The guy she's doing it to is also rubbing his shoulder afterwards. He wouldn't be rubbing his shoulder. He would just pop to it. But if you want this show to have all the gritty, authentic qualities that they're striving for, and this show is definitely trying to be gritty and authentic whenever possible, well, then you have to get MMA right. MMA is an insanely popular sport. Millions of people watch it, and everybody watching this will be like, all right, that scene fucking sucks. But what makes the scene suck even more is when she yells at her coaches and tells them not to pull punches. Only total dumbasses would say that and not be immediately corrected by their coach, because people who get knocked out in training, guess what? It erodes your chin and makes you less likely to be able to take a punch in the future. It doesn't make you get tougher getting knocked out all the time. It actually makes you more prone to getting knocked out. Look at any fighter toward the end of their career. It's called getting chinny. And Ellie's instructors were doing precisely the right thing by pulling their punches, because they're training, they're drilling, they're teaching her. They're not trying to, give her permanent brain injury. But the fact that Craig Mazin doesn't know that he's actually making Ellie sound like a dumbass, as opposed to some badass like Clint Eastwood by saying don't pull your punches, it just makes the character more unlikable. And obviously, not everybody out there cares about combat sports, but I think even if you've never seen a combat sport in your life, you'd be able to tell that there's a lack of authenticity in the way she's behaving in that scene that just makes her more annoying. And it's not just her instructors and Joel that she's a total pain in the ass with. She's a pain in the ass with pretty much every single person this entire first episode. When they're going on patrol, which is a scene straight out of the game, including finding the dismembered animals and all that stuff, and all the fights inside that building that has been cleared. It actually is a pretty good adaptation of some of the scenes from early on in the game. But what's incredibly annoying is how Ellie has been surviving with this community for 5 years. And one of the reasons this community has survived for 5 years is that they're very careful when they go on patrol. And if they find signs of the bad guys, they go back and report it. And they come back and they execute all the infected in sight. And the fact that Ellie's treating it like she's basically a teenager sneaking out to have a few shots of vodka, with her friends late night, it just, once again, it erodes our ability to feel as if she's taken this seriously, or that she actually is as hardcore as they're trying to portray her. Because if she were as hardcore as they're trying to portray her, she would recognize that there's a reason they do things the way they do them. It's not just because, they're being big meanies and trying to keep her in her place. They're doing it so that the community can continue to survive for many more years to come. So they're just they're writing her like she's like a 14-year-old brat who has no understanding of this world at all, and as someone just now learning about the infected, as opposed to somebody who's been fighting the infected for 5 years. And sorry to get my needle stuck on this, but it's just one annoying scene after another. Like when she's out learning how to be a marksman with Tommy, and she starts screaming, "I got bit! I got bit!" It's like, somebody please just give her a spanking and send her into timeout in her room and tell her, you can come out when you learn how to behave like an adult. Because I can remember what it was like to be 19, and I knew 19-year-old girls, and none of them were as immature and annoying as Ellie. And these are 19-year-old girls that I knew who were not constantly dealing with the threat of being invaded by infected monsters. So even then, they showed more emotional maturity than Ellie is showing so far. A lot of Hollywood writers do struggle to write teenagers, where they either write them like total brats, or they write them as overly wise, precocious young adults. And it's hard to write teenagers in a convincing way, but I think Craig Mazin is failing, even if he's excelling in some other areas when it comes to science fiction and thrills and tension and that sort of thing. And by far the most annoying scene throughout the entire episode is during this big dance scene where Ellie and Dina, who's played by Isabella Merced, they're having a little moment and they're making out on the dance floor, and Dina's a little bit drunk. And somebody tells them, this is a family gathering, take that somewhere else, you dykes, or something like that. And Joel comes in and shoves him. And immediately Ellie, turns on Joel and is yeah, and, squeals at him about something don't talk to me, or don't do that. Or, I can't remember what she said, but it's how about just saying, thank you for saving my life 100 times over in season 1. I promise I won't be such a bitch to you in the future. But, and then of course when she comes home and he's fixing her guitar and restringing it for her, she's kind of scowls at him and pouts and storms back to her little garage in which she stays. Yeah, it's going to be tough to stick with this season, or at least it's going to be tough to keep reviewing every episode of the season if they continue to portray Ellie in this fashion. And who knows, this might be all a long game by Craig Mazin for some big, major dramatic payoff, but it's going to be slow going until we get there. But as I mentioned earlier, in spite of my antagonism toward the character throughout the episode, I did still feel genuine concern, especially when she goes up against the semi kind of sort of stalker thinking infected, unlike anything we've seen so far in the show. And obviously the person that's stalking her is recently infected, but Ellie falls through a hole in the floor, and as she's going through People magazine and looking at Jennifer Aniston articles from decades ago, we can see, I don't know if it's in Clicker. I can't remember what the stage is right before Clicker. It's something, then Clicker, then Bloater. All right, I paused for a second because I wanted to find this out. But the first stage is Runner, followed by Stalker, followed by Clicker, followed by Bloater. And if you've played deep into the second game, you know there's one more stage beyond that. But what's interesting about this, it looks like it's somewhere between like a Runner and a Stalker, but it's clever and it uses like retreat tactics. Usually they just charge right at you no matter what. But she's obviously trying to lure Ellie into attacking her so that she can sneak around her. And that's a new wrinkle that might make the infected considerably more dangerous for this community moving forward. And of course, as a result of being a little bit cocky and a little bit reckless, Ellie does get bitten for her trouble, but then she uses a knife to kind of disguise the bite mark so people won't know that she's been bitten yet again. But it doesn't seem to have put a dent in her, in the chip on her shoulder one bit. But the other detail that I found really exciting was that as the party starts winding down and people are walking around like, I guess they're lighting little fizzlers, we see this giant pipe that leads directly into the middle of the community. And that pipe has all sorts of plant life that's been growing in it over time, but we get a quick little zoom in as some of the plants are moving around. And yeah, I'm not enough of an expert on the lore of this game to know if this is a new wrinkle that's been added by Craig Mazin to the show or if it comes from the game. So for anybody out there who's a total psycho about the games, and there are people out there who are totally psycho about these games and have played them over and over and over again, and they buy the remastered editions, but I feel like that's going to be something new to look forward to, like where quite literally like the natural world is like upping its game when it comes to trying to infect as many human beings as humanly possible. It's just fucking creepy. So I will stick with this show just for those details, but I don't want to come across like some bitter old bastard who's just, talking shit about Bella Ramsey's interpretation of the character every week, because once again, I think that's Craig Mazin's fault. The character as written in the game is not like that. So, and Craig Mazin wrote the first 5 episodes of the season, so I'm going to lay the blame right at his doorstep. And as far as the original games are concerned, I did try to get into them, but I just like different genres of games. As you can see, I'm a big From Software fan, whether that's Dark Souls 1, 2, and 3, or Sekiro, or Elden Ring, or even Larian games like Baldur's Gate 3, which has patch 8 coming out on Tuesday, so my entire private life is just going to descend back into Baldur's Gate 3 for honor mode one more time as we have all these new subclasses. And with Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, one of my favorite recent games, I guess Baldur's Gate 3 is still recent as well, but it's like 2 years old, whereas Kingdom Come Deliverance is brand new. But they're releasing hardcore mode on Tuesday, so there's all kinds of cool stuff going on in the world of games. So I can't promise that I'll spend any time playing The Last of Us games between now and the end of the season, because I'll be totally consumed with those other games I just mentioned. Yeah, the world of video games remains more fascinating than ever, and unlike movies and shows, where I very rarely discover something that I just completely, totally, intensely love, with games, I mean, I've got plenty of all-time favorite games that I hold very high in my estimation, but some of the best games that I've ever played have all come out in recent years, which makes video games as a medium just feel very vibrant and exciting and alive, where there's a realistic chance in any given year that the best game you've ever played might come out. I mean, Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, I think, is a strong contender for one of the best games that I've ever played, and it came out like 2 months ago. And so I hope that The Last of Us Season 2 and Season 3, which HBO's already given the green light to, will be fucking incredible, because it means that it'll lead to more great shows and movies based on games. But it's interesting seeing how, like, when it comes to film and TV adaptations, once upon a time, movies and shows were downstream from great books and great plays and that sort of thing. But like books kind of drove the culture because those were the stories that were being adapted. Now it's video games. So I guess are video games at the top of the pecking order when it comes to culture? I guess new media or digital media, whether that's TikTok or YouTube or whatever, might be considered like the ultimate alpha at the top of the food chain, eating up everybody else. But it does feel like movies and shows are playing second fiddle to games in some respect. If the most well-regarded shows or best-reviewed shows are being adapted from games, well then, who's got the upper hand in the culture? I would say video games, but we shall see how the rest of the season continues to unfold. But I think that's all I've got to say for now, and I'm sorry if I came across as a little negative about the character of Ellie, but something tells me I'm not going to be alone. I imagine it's going to be a very divisive episode where there are going to be a lot of people like, fuck you, Ellie's amazing, how dare you? And there are going to be some people like, why is she behaving this way? And so I look forward to the online debate as it unfolds this week. I'm sure it'll be very polite and reasonable and impassioned, and everybody will just make their points very calmly and very politely, and then they'll just go on about their business. So we'll see how the culture war continues to unfold when it comes to the discussions of this show, because the second game was mired in its own controversies 5 years ago, which seems like 1,000 years ago. And I guess in terms of pop culture, it was. But if you're worried about spoilers at all and you've never played the games, don't dig too deeply into online debates, because you will inevitably come across spoilers from the second game. And they are massive. They're whoppers. I don't know when the event that must not be named will take place. My assumption is that it's going to be the end of season 2. And if you don't know what I'm talking about and you want to remain in the dark, well, then I'm just going to shut up now. But I hope you enjoyed this video. Please consider liking, subscribing, hitting that notification bell. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. Hope everybody has a great week. But more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.